Welcome to your Essential Business Briefing. I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up, is Lebanon heading for a debt default? As a major deadline approaches, we look at the causes of the financial crisis there. A new Financial Secrecy index reveals the countries with the worst track record for hiding money from tax authorities. And hunting for black truffles, sometimes called black diamonds, in France's Vaucluse region. First up, though, Lebanon's financial crisis is facing a new cliff edge. The country has been suffering from a shortage of dollars for months now, causing intermittent bank closures as well as limits on money withdrawals or transfers. The government is due to repay a $1.2 billion bond in early March, and there are fears that it could default on that obligation. My colleague Lean Rafai has been speaking to Fareed Belhaj, who's Vice President of the World Bank in charge of this region. He says urgent action is needed.
The prediction of many who said that Lebanon was defying gravity when it came to its financial system, those predictions have proven to be right. It is now for the government of Lebanon to devise new ways of engaging, both when it comes to its financial system and more broadly when it comes to its economy. The Lebanese economy is in dire need for structural, deep, far-reaching reforms. We have all been saying that for the last very many years. Lebanese themselves are saying it. Politicians themselves are saying it. It is high time to move ahead on that.
So, how did it come to this? Kate Moody's been delving into the background of Lebanon's crisis. Kate.
Stephen, after emerging from years of civil war, the Lebanese government was looking for stability. In 1997, it fixed currency exchange rates, pegging the Lebanese pound at just over 1,500 to $1. It means the government needs huge reserves of foreign currency to keep the pound steady. The IMF says the pound is overvalued by as much as 50%, and the black market puts the dollar closer to 2,300. Heavily reliant on imports, the economy was propped up by tourism, international investments, and remittance payments from Lebanese expats around the world. All three have declined over the past 5 years, putting pressure on the country's finances. Banks, meanwhile, raised interest rates to attract more funds. They bucked the international trend in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, offering returns of around 10% for deposits. Public debt piled up, hitting 155% of GDP last year. That's among the highest rates in the world. In 2019, about half the government's money was devoted to servicing external and domestic debt. Lebanon's commercial banks own a lot of government bonds, making them especially exposed to the risk of default. There are a number of external factors at play as well, including regional tensions and the flow of refugees from Syria to Lebanon. Inflation has risen sharply. Projections say it could hit 28% this year, and half the population is at risk of poverty. In October, banks started limiting individuals' withdrawals or transfers, sparking panic and adding fuel to already fiery public protests. With some $4 billion worth of debt payments due this year and dwindling reserves, Lebanon's crisis may now come to a head. Stephen?
Kate, thank you very much for that. Now, is the world getting better at collecting tax? Yes, according to the latest Financial Secrecy index from the activist think tank, the Tax Justice Network. Nevertheless, there are countries who are still helping individuals to hide their money. The Cayman Islands topped the network's latest list. The United States is in second place, while Switzerland has moved down in the rankings to third. That's the first time it's moved off the top spot since 2011. Hong Kong and Singapore making up the top 5. John Christensen is the co-founder of the Tax Justice Network, and he joins us now from London. John, thanks for being with us. Can you give us an idea, how do you put this index together? What factors go into how you rate different countries?
Well, the Financial Secrecy Index is a really in-depth investigation of the laws, the regulations, the compliance processes of over 100 countries around the world, where we look at how they create an environment of offshore secrecy. In other words, secrecy that allows people outside these particular jurisdictions to use these jurisdictions to hide their activities from tax authorities or other authorities elsewhere in the world. This time round, of course, we see Cayman come to the top. Cayman, everyone knows that Cayman is a very major offshore financial centre and tax haven. They don't necessarily know how large it is, but it has grown enormously in recent years, and it is also a very secretive place, and that's what puts Cayman to the very top of the index.
Now, the European Union agrees with you on this. This week, they added the Cayman Islands to their tax haven blacklist as well. What sort of power does being named on these sorts of lists have? Does it force authorities to take action on the issue? I mean, the Cayman Islands is well known for its status in secrecy.
Personally, I think that blacklists can be quite counterproductive because in the case of the European Union, for example, yes, I welcome the blacklisting of the Cayman Islands, but then question why some European Union jurisdictions like Luxembourg and Netherlands and Switzerland and others are not included. So one has to question whether blacklists are as objective as they need to be. But in the case of the Financial Secrecy Index, this provides a ranking which can be used by countries around the world. We look at all countries and we say, OK, what are the deficiencies in their legal arrangements or in their cooperative arrangements for international cooperation? Where are these deficiencies? What are these deficiencies? And what can be done about them?
It might be surprising to some people that the United States is second on your list. Why is the US so high?
Everyone who works offshore knows that the United States is a tax haven, and you have particular states within the United States that are seen as right there at the forefront of being tax havens. Delaware, of course, famously is a tax haven, but so is Nevada, so is Wyoming, so is South Dakota. And if you look at the United States as a whole, it's a combination of these particular states, plus the fact that the United States is very weak at international cooperation. For example, it hasn't signed up to the OECD's Common Reporting Standard for information sharing with other countries. It's taken its own route, the so-called FATCA route, but that route only helps the United States. It doesn't help other countries. So the United States, for quite a long time, and this precedes the Trump administration, for quite a long time, they have not been cooperating with the rest of the world.
The United Kingdom has, increased its secrecy score. Is there a fear that as it leaves the European Union that it will be more inclined to act outside of those transparent arrangements and outside of those international agreements that it's part of?
For some time now, I've been monitoring the UK's position, not just the current Johnson government, but the previous May government. And you'll find that quite a few of the senior ministers and their advisors talk about the so-called Singapore on the Thames model. Now, what they mean by that is a model where they further deregulate and also cut taxes. In other words, they're pushing for a race to the bottom on regulation and on taxes. And this is something that should cause everyone a great deal of concern, because what they seem to want is to create a super tax haven sitting alongside the European Union, not complying with European Union laws and regulations, particularly on transparency arrangements. And I think that this is something that, interestingly, will harm Europe and the rest of the world, but I think will also harm the UK economy, because the UK economy seems to be in the grips of what's called a finance curse. All this financial services activity in London doesn't actually benefit the rest of the UK economy. So I think that there are genuine grounds for concern about this Singapore on the Thames model, and genuine grounds for concern that the UK will go even further down that route.
OK, John Christensen from the Tax Justice Network, thank you very much for speaking to us. Now, France's truffles are a delicacy renowned the world over. The small nuggets are sold for hundreds and sometimes over €1,000 per kilo. But the size of the harvest each year depends on summer rainfall and, of course, the small farmers who go hunting for them. As this year's season comes to a close, we're taking you to the Vaucluse region, where 70% of French truffles are produced, to meet one of those who lives off these so-called black diamonds. Claire Rush has more.
Provence's Vaucluse Mountains are home to a jewel of French gastronomy, the black truffle, known as a black diamond. Rare and expensive, it can be found, if you know how, under the oak trees. Every morning, Paul and his dog come to the woods in search of truffles.
That's it. Come on. In front. Let's find them. Keep going.
Its proper name is Tuber melanosporum, but everyone here calls it the black winter truffle.
That's beautiful, isn't it? Look at that. That's splendid. That must be 40 to 50 grams. It's the perfect truffle. Look. That's it. Nice and black.
The former farmer converted to truffle gathering when he was 30. He's cultivated land with oaks that he's planted himself. But what he loves most is hunting for these treasures out in the wild, in the forest. Paul drives miles every day, rain or shine.
That's it. Is that one? Yes, that's great. There we go. It's really a pleasure to walk in the woods accompanied by my dog. It's magic. They're everywhere. There are hectares of mountain that are divided into various plots that you can hire through the National Office of Forests. That gives you the right to hunt for truffles, and that's what I do.
Paul sells his truffles here at the weekly market in Kaupentras. The market is slow at the end of truffle season, and many batches haven't been bought. 17 kilos sold this week, down from 25 the previous week. But it continues to be a truffle connoisseur's paradise.
It's the taste, it's the smell, it's extraordinary.
An estimated 70% of France's truffle production comes from here. The black truffle season runs from mid-November to mid-March.
That's it from us for this week. Don't forget you can listen back to the show as a podcast on Apple, Spotify and Stitcher, and you can find us on social media at France24 Business on Facebook or tweet me at NewStephen. Until next time, thanks for watching.